Aboud stared at the telegram, his brow furrowed, his mind racing with questions. News like this was rare, unexpected. An inheritance, it felt surreal, almost like a dream. From a distant relative he never knew. How could this be possible?
He reread the message, each word sending a chill down his spine. The implications were enormous. A vast fortune awaited him, a sprawling estate in the countryside. It was beyond his wildest dreams. Aboud's life in the city had been simple, predictable, a routine he had grown accustomed to. This inheritance threatened to upend everything he knew, everything he had built.
Intrigue warred with apprehension within him. The unknown beckoned, but so did the fear of change. He had lived modestly, content with his lot, never yearning for more than he had. Such wealth seemed unfathomable, unearned, almost like a burden rather than a blessing. Yet there was a thrill in the unknown, a pull towards the life this inheritance promised, a life of luxury and mystery.
The telegram mentioned a solicitor, Mr. Edgar Thorne, awaiting his arrival at the estate. This added a layer of legitimacy. Aboud decided to heed the call, to unravel the mystery surrounding his newfound fortune. He packed his bags with a mix of excitement and dread. Little did he know, his journey would be paved with more than just curiosity. It would be fraught with peril. Danger lurked around the corner, drawn to him like moths to a flame. He was stepping into a world he didn't understand. The inheritance, it seemed, was a prize many coveted, and Aboud was just a pawn in their deadly game. The stakes were higher than he ever imagined.
The train journey was long, filled with restless anticipation. Aboud couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and dread as the train chugged along the tracks. The countryside whizzed by, a blur of green and brown. The scenery outside seemed to mirror his turbulent thoughts, ever-changing and uncertain. Aboud couldn't shake off a feeling of being watched, of unseen eyes following his every move. It was as if the very air around him was alive with whispers and secrets.
At the station, a horse-drawn carriage awaited him. The sight of it was both quaint and unsettling, a relic from another time. The driver, a burly man with a stony face, remained silent throughout the journey to the estate. His silence was almost oppressive, adding to the weight of Aboud's unease. The estate loomed large, an imposing structure against the twilight sky. It seemed to watch him with 1,000 unseen eyes, each window a silent observer. Shadows stretched long and deep, whispering secrets in the fading light. The air was thick with the promise of untold stories and hidden truths.
As Aboud stepped inside, a shiver ran down his spine. The house seemed to breathe, its walls closing in around him. The air was heavy, thick with an eerie silence. Dust particles floated in the dim light, like tiny specters dancing in the gloom. He could hear the sound of his own breathing, loud and out of place in the stillness. Each breath seemed to echo, amplifying the silence.
The silence was broken only by the soft creaking of the floorboards beneath his feet. Each creak was a reminder of the house's age and its many secrets. Each step seemed to echo in the vast emptiness, amplifying his unease. The hallway stretched on, a tunnel of shadows and whispers. The feeling of being watched intensified, prickling at the back of his neck. It was as if the very walls had eyes, observing his every move. Mr. Thorne, the solicitor, was a frail, gaunt man with eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. His presence was almost ghostly, as if he were a relic from another time. He spoke of the inheritance with a strange detachment, his words formal and rehearsed. It was as if he had delivered this speech countless times before, each time with the same lack of emotion.
Aboud learned of his distant relative, a recluse with a penchant for secrecy, who had amassed a fortune through investments and ventures unknown. The letter detailed the vast estate and the many hidden assets that now belonged to him. That night, as Aboud tried to sleep in the large, unfamiliar bed, he couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. The shadows seemed to move, and the silence was deafening.
A noise from outside his window startled him. It was a soft rustling, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. He crept closer, peering into the darkness. His breath caught in his throat as he strained to see what was out there. A figure, tall and shadowy, disappeared into the bushes. It moved with an eerie grace, almost as if it were gliding.
His heart pounded in his chest. The fear was palpable, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. Was it just his imagination, or was someone lurking in the shadows, watching his every move? The feeling of being watched was overwhelming.
He couldn't be sure, but he knew he couldn't ignore the possibility that he was in danger. The night seemed to close in around him, suffocating and oppressive. The thought of a vast fortune now seemed more of a curse than a blessing. The weight of the inheritance pressed down on him, heavy and foreboding. He was a prisoner in his own gilded cage, surrounded by unseen enemies and creeping fear. The opulence of the room did little to comfort him. Instead, it only heightened his sense of isolation and dread. Days turned into a blur of unease and suspicion. Aboud felt a constant presence lurking just outside his awareness. Strange things began to happen.
A loose floorboard almost caused him to trip and fall down the grand staircase. The brakes of his carriage mysteriously failed on a steep hill, nearly sending him careening into a ditch. He couldn't shake off the feeling that these weren't mere accidents.
Someone was trying to harm him, to scare him away, perhaps even eliminate him, but who and why? These questions gnawed at him, amplifying his anxiety. The idyllic countryside now seemed menacing. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of the floorboards sent his heart racing. He was living on a knife edge, the weight of the inheritance a heavy burden on his shoulders. Section 5, the break-in. One night, the silence was shattered.
A crash from downstairs jolted me awake.
He grabbed the poker from beside the fireplace, his heart pounding in his chest.
As I crept down the stairs, I could hear the sound of someone rummaging through my belongings in the study.
He threw open the door, ready to confront the intruder. But the room was empty. Papers were strewn across the floor, furniture overturned. The window was open, the curtains billowing in the night breeze. Whoever had been there was gone.
But they had left something behind.
On the floor, amidst the chaos, lay a silver cigarette case engraved with a single letter, V. This was no ordinary burglary, this was a message, a threat. Section 6. Questions for the caretaker. Aboud knew he couldn't stay silent any longer.
I sought out the estate's caretaker, a weathered old man named Silas, who had served the previous owner for decades.
Silas listened intently to Aboud's concerns, his face etched with a mixture of worry and grim understanding. He confirmed Aboud's suspicions.
The inheritance was indeed coveted by many, whispered to be more than just a fortune.
Some believed the old recluse had possessed rare artifacts, hidden treasures. Silas, however, claimed ignorance to the specifics, his loyalty to his late master absolute. Yet a flicker in his eyes, a hesitant pause in his speech, betrayed something more.
Silas knew more than he was letting on.
He held pieces to the puzzle, but whether out of fear or loyalty, he remained tight-lipped.
Realizing I couldn't trust anyone, I decided to leave the estate. I packed a small bag, my mind racing. I had to get away, to find answers on my own.
But as Aboud made his way downstairs, he found the doors bolted shut. He was trapped. Panic welled up inside him. He raced from room to room, each exit securely locked. He was a prisoner in his own home, hunted by an unseen enemy. The weight of his situation, the danger he was in, crashed down upon him.
I had to escape, but how?
Looking around desperately, his eyes fell upon a dusty tapestry hanging on the wall. He remembered Silas mentioning a network of hidden passages within the estate walls, remnants of its long and storied past.
With a surge of adrenaline, I tore the tapestry from the wall, revealing a narrow opening. It was a tight squeeze, but I managed to wriggle through, my heart pounding with every movement.
The passage was dark and musty, but it offered a way out. He followed the twisting tunnels, his hands trailing along the damp stone walls. Finally, he emerged into the cool night air, gasping for breath. He was free, but for how long?
I had escaped the confines of the estate, but the true danger, I knew, lay in the unknown. I had to disappear, to become invisible, until I could unravel the truth about my inheritance and the people who sought to claim it for themselves.
Days later, seeking refuge in a bustling city miles away, Aboud stumbled upon a hidden antique shop. Drawn by an inexplicable pull, he entered. As his gaze swept over the dusty artifacts, it landed on a familiar silver cigarette case, the same one the intruder had left behind.
This can't be a coincidence.
He confronted the shopkeeper, an old woman with sharp eyes, who reluctantly revealed the truth.
Who does this belong to?
The cigarette case belonged to a notorious group known as the Veil, infamous for their clandestine dealings in stolen treasures and lost artifacts. The V was not a threat, but a calling card.
My inheritance, it turns out, is far more valuable than I could have imagined. It's not the fortune they seek, but something hidden within the estate. Something that belonged to my ancestor, something that holds unimaginable power.
Armed with this newfound knowledge, Aboud knew he couldn't run forever. He had to return to the estate, to face his pursuers and protect what was rightfully his. But he would not face them blindly. He would use their tactics against them, turning their game to his advantage.
I will become the hunter, not the hunted.
The race was on, a desperate battle against time and unseen forces. The inheritance, he now realized, was not about wealth but about legacy, about protecting something far greater than himself. The estate awaited, shrouded in secrets and danger. Aboud was ready.